I married a fashion designer, so she put a lot of color into my life. And she makes most of my suits and most of my clothes, as well as her own, of course.
Is there ever a sweatpants and t-shirt day in the Roxborough household?
Well, I don't work out in a suit. But
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.
Welcome back to another edition of the Business of Betting podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Edelstein, senior analyst at ingame.com. I'm joined by somebody who knows a lot less about the business than I do, so just bear with me today, folks. We'll get them up to speed as quickly as we can. Gentleman by the name of Roxy Roxborough. Roxy, I can't thank you enough for sitting down with me this afternoon.
oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Obviously, I joke. You've probably done more, learned more, know more in 6 or 7 molecules in your body than I'll ever know about this business. But one thing that, we did say when we were discussing this behind the scenes, your life story has been told numerous times in numerous places. And if anyone wants to hear all about it, just Google Roxy Roxborough and we're going to find out. And I'm not saying I'm going to ignore your past. In fact, I'm going to start with something from your past. But I do want to concentrate a little bit more on present day and the future. Because again, nobody's seen more than you have. And I'm sure you have a lot to say about the present world of gambling. But I do want to start in the past for a minute because something happened this week that is in the news. Hastings Park, thoroughbred racetrack up in Vancouver. They've been running races for 132 years. They're no longer running races. Why is this important? Well, why don't you tell us, Roxy?
Well, it was my introduction to legal gambling, and that was in 1968. I was 17 years old. Now, I had done some gambling before, mostly snooker or 14-1, playing pool. I bet a few World Series before then, too. My father took me to the track. Now, this is something people of my generation experienced racetracks because their father took them. That doesn't happen today. The interesting thing, my father wasn't a big horse fan. There was somebody that owed him money, and the guy who owed him money had horses. So he'd go out there to see if the guy was out there to watch his horses so he could collect some of his money. So 1968, you don't have any other gambling. You have casinos only in Nevada. You don't have any legal sports betting. In 1968, BC does not have a lottery. They have some card rooms with their private memberships. So everybody in the gambling business hung out at the racetrack, and when the racetrack wasn't open, they settled up at pool halls. So pool halls and racetracks were the venues where gamblers hung around. I decided I sort of liked that lifestyle. It didn't make any difference I wasn't old enough to get in. They didn't card people that looked under 40 back in that day. You came to the counter with money and you got a bet. So that was my introduction to legalized gambling.
Now, growing up, I know, again, hearing, reading up and knowing your life story, you don't come from a family of gamblers. Both your parents are academics, is that right?
No, my father was a Harvard MBA, and he was a financial troubleshooter for companies that were about to go into bankruptcy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So this was not like a family business that you decided to go into. So
not at all.
What did mom and dad think when you started dabbling in this stuff?
My father was a little more tolerant. My mother, not so much. She just said she had a son that lived out west. And when I moved to Las Vegas, she just said she had a son that moved out west. However, there was a 48-hour special that was hosted by Dan Rather, who she watched every night on the CBS Evening News. And I was on that show, interviewed by Dan Rather. And the next morning, all her friends phoned her up. I saw your son. I saw your son on TV. And she says, yes, he's a rather prominent person in Las Vegas. So I don't know. She saw me at a different light then.
Rather prominent it's a bit of an undersell. I mean, you were making odds for the world at that point, yeah?
Yeah, our company, Las Vegas Sports Consultants, made odds for about 90% of the sports books in Las Vegas. And we collaborated with bookies in Australia, South Africa, and England at that time, yes.
That's remarkable. Now I know you split your time now between Vegas and Thailand, and I'm going to talk to you about Thailand a little bit later. But when you look at the landscape, both the actual brick and mortar, nuts and bolts, day-to-day life of Vegas, as well as like, the behind the scenes gambling world that, the public isn't see. How does it compare today to when you were coming up and when you were in your heyday running your business back then?
Look, people still lay 11 to 10. You still have to pay your losers, collect your winners, and that's about all that's the same. You'd never even have to meet, or there's no reason to meet a person to make sports betting now. You used to have to go in, open an account, or if you played with illegal bookies, you had to have some contacts with the runners that came around and picked up your money, or you talked on the phone to the clerks, or sometimes you talked to Mr. Big himself. There's no reason to ever talk to anybody now. I understand that the reason for the industry to get big, the personal touch had to go. You can't have 1,000 bets available a day and have customers in 39 states and know who they are other than what the algorithm says. So I think it's massively different. It's driven by technology, but technology drove a lot of the business in my world too.
Well, I was going to say, you are, generally considered to be one of the first guys to really use technology, really use computers, really use algorithms. Did you foresee a time that you were doing would be the standard?
No, we were just chasing people that were beating the books. They were using computers, so we did too. One of the first pretty famous computer group, which Billy Walters was associated with, was a pretty high profile federal court case here in Las Vegas. They were using computers, and I thought they were winning too much from us. So we had to combat it. And bookmaking is a pretty reactive business, not proactive. So as long as books are making a quota or the book manager's not getting called up to the office and has to explain losses, things just keep ticking over. But sometimes you have to react to players that are winning. You have to come up with new ways. As an oddsmaker, I always wanted to be more proactive. And when I was a bookmaker, I wanted to be more proactive too. But this business doesn't really reward people for standing out.
How different, well, not different, that's a bad way to frame this, but like, would you want to get in the business today?
Interesting. Well, everybody knows they could do something better a second time. The question is, do you want to spend the time doing it? And when I retired, I sort of knew that answer. One of the reasons I moved to Thailand, I had a non-compete contract for 3 years. I changed it to 5 and I moved to Thailand. And one of the reasons, I didn't know what I was going to do in Thailand, but one of the reasons I wanted to move was I saw a lot of my friends, they have a non-compete contract in lots of businesses. They wait for it to end. In the meantime, they're up all night figuring out how they can do this better again. And I just thought, well, I spent 18 years running Las Vegas Sports Consultants. I was also the founder and sole owner. I didn't want to revisit that again. It didn't mean I didn't want to be around sports gambling, because now I'm back to playing, which is the way I started originally. But I didn't want to revisit that business again.
So you are actively betting these days?
I'm down to only a few sports now, because my technology, or the people I'm working with me, they're my age too. And, hey, maybe we're a step behind everybody. You don't have to be on the cutting edge to win. And the money isn't the reason we're doing it. It's because the camaraderie. Of course, we're trying to win. If we lose, we quit. I mean, if there's a sport where we lose, we quit. So
what sports are you playing?
Right now, Formula One. The betting menu around the world is totally different than it is in the United States. There's so much to bet, including in race. It's mind-boggling. And I just dropped English soccer, doing baseball, and I'm doing horse racing. For some reason, I'm still winning. That'd be a really easy one to drop.
Right. Baseball is interesting to me. I feel like, I've heard many pro gamblers, something along the lines of, if, you could tell the insane people from the sane people if they bet baseball or not. But you're still in those streets. You still love it.
Well, it's great when you're in Thailand. You don't listen to the games, or you don't see them because of the time differences. You wake up and you just scroll the scores. And then when you go back and look at the box scores, you get your torture. But at least it's not live.
Fair enough. Thailand, what provoked you? Why Thailand when you decided to hang it up and move?
Well, I had been vacationing there in the early 90s, and it was void of technology. And I know that when I went there, I could escape the world. I can get in touch with people, but they couldn't get in touch with me. And I thought that was pretty good. However, technology changes you wherever you are, and you seem to succumb to that trap. But I'm too old now to pick out another country. I mean, I like Thai culture. I think it's a great place to visit. I think it's increasingly more difficult to live there for tax reasons and other reasons where they're not that friendly towards immigration. I'll bet you never heard that before. So it happens everywhere. So it's just getting more difficult. But like I said, I've always maintained a house in Las Vegas too.
And where in Thailand is your residence?
Well, Bangkok and Phuket.
Yeah.
Phuket's a beach resort. I don't like the sun. I don't like the beach. I hate sand, but it's got clean air. And clean air goes a long way in Asia because the pollution is getting, well, it's strangling people.
Yeah, I think I had mentioned to you, I went to Thailand for the first time in 2004. I was kind of dragged there by my wife. She wanted to do something adventurous. I went back in 05, 06, and 07 and almost moved there for a job at one point. So there is something about the culture there that kind of gets in your skin. It's interesting though, you said when did you move out there? In the early 90s?
Yes.
And so by the time I was out there in 2004, when I was in Bangkok, to me, it was more modern than New York City, more modern than America. So it was a quick pace of catching up there, huh?
Yeah. So I think what happens is a lot of third world countries can leapfrog existing technologies they don't need. So landlines really never caught on in Thailand when cell phones came in. People ditched them, got rid of them. So they skip over that legacy. They skipped over the personal computer hardware simply with smartphones. So they can leapfrog a lot of things. The reason they can have an extensive subway and SkyTrain system in Bangkok is because they eminent domain with impunity is what I can say. If the government needs the land, they get it.
Yeah, the SkyTrain, I remember, that was one of the things that really stood out to me. I remember when I went there and I came back and people asked me how it was. And I said, well, you're on Earth, you're surrounded by humans, but that's pretty much where like the, similarities end because everything was so different. I'll never forget the SkyTrain, and basically it's an above ground subway for lack of a better term. And I guess maybe it's still like this. I haven't been there in 20 years, but there was like dots, circles on the station area where you would wait for your train and people would calmly line up on each dot to enter the train. The doors would open, people would exit first, then people would calmly enter the train. Compare that to New York City subways, right? Where it's a free-for-all. That was the first thing that struck me. And the second thing that struck me, on those trains, people talking on their cell phones, they'd have the phone to their ear and they would cup their hand over their face so that they wouldn't interrupt other people on the train. And it just blew my mind. That's not the way it is.
Well, it's a civil society still.
Yeah. It's remarkable, but we keep threatening to go back. And it's really a place that I love visiting. So let's take a look at the sports betting landscape today. What's your, post-PASPA, what's your top level, 10,000 foot in the air view of what it is, what people hoped it would be, what it isn't, just what surprises you, what doesn't surprise you?
Well, let's go back to PASPA. When our record saying that this isn't going to be a clear shot, that every state's going to have interests. There's going to be tribal interests. There's going to be racetrack interests. There's going to be lottery interests. There's going to be the Las Vegas casino interests. And of course, there's going to be new players. Then I got right. And I said it would hamstring some of the states' ability to offer a good product. I got that right. And I said some places will have too much taxation. I got that right. Here's what I got wrong. I didn't think that FanDuel and DraftKings could dominate the market the way they could. I never thought about that they would be 80% of the market. I also didn't see coming. I saw that be pretty rapid consolidation too. I thought we'd be down to about 6 or 7 players now, but I understand why I was wrong there. When your competitors are only doing 1 or 2% of the business, you don't need to buy them. Unless they have better technology, you don't need to buy them. You just let them go broke. And that seems to be the strategy. I was wrong about the taxation in the long run because the way to get around excessive taxation is just offer bets that hold 15 to 20% and sort of turn away from straight bets. Now, some of that was driven by the taxation, first from Pennsylvania and then in New York. And so I was wrong about that. Of course, no one saw prediction markets becoming sports betting. I mean, if they did, about 10 years ago, interactive brokers looked at sports betting also as prediction markets, but they decided there wasn't enough in it. So I didn't see that coming. I'm still not sure that that's going to scoop all the business out of sports books. People haven't got their 1099B forms yet. The uninformed players are going to be hit with these 1256 contract taxations and marking to market. They have no idea what it's going to be looking at. And I'm talking about the people that have been playing on Robinhood, because generally Robinhood's considered to have a smaller, what do you want to say, people with less wealth and that aren't that savvy in trading. It's going to be a shocker for them when those 1099Bs get issued. And it's going to have to be on their return.
So what's it going to look like? Because this is the first I'm talking to anybody about this. So like every trade that they make, that's going to be...
Yes. Now, if you lose money, you don't have much of a problem, but you might be winning money that you don't know about. For example, let's say you bet the Patriots to win the Super Bowl 2 months ago. Well, on December 31st, let's say now they're about 10-1. So on December 31st, that's going to be marked to market at 10-1. And the difference between the 100-1 and the 10-1 is going to be your profit, even though you're still 5 weeks away from knowing whether you won or not. Now, the converse is that you'll pick it up on next year's return, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, I'm not a tax expert, but I've spent a lot of time with tax and sports gambling, and I think that's going to be a shocker for a lot of people. Also, they're called 1256 contracts, and they're treated differently. They're a blend of capital gains and street gains, or based on what your income bracket is. I think that'll be a shocker for a lot of people.
Right. Obviously, all this, the DraftKings, FanDuel, Fanatics, Underdog, they're all getting into the prediction market space, Prize Picks, all these other gambling companies. I'm almost of the opinion that I almost think they're getting into it strictly because California and Texas are still, wide open. That if they didn't have to get into it for fear of losing out, I feel like they almost wouldn't. Because I have real questions about what's going to happen when and if the United States Supreme Court gets their hands on the question of prediction markets, specifically as it comes to sports. It's one thing to say, what's the price of wheat going to be in July? It's another thing to say, how many yards is Patrick Mahomes going to throw for tomorrow, right? And I'm just kind of curious what, again, you've been around all this for so long. I'm not asking you now to become a United States Supreme Court expert, but if you were putting money down on this, where do you see this headed? Do you think that the prediction markets will continue to be able to allow offering sports contracts, or do you think they're going to get hamstrung? Nobody knows the answer, to be clear.
Yes, that's true. When I was involved in when lotteries were trying to get sports betting in the mid-'90s, and I've argued both sides. I remember in front of the Kentucky Supreme Court, I argued that a parlay card was chance, and then in Oregon, 3 weeks later, I argued that it was skill. So, it's sort of like hordes, whoever pays you, right? I don't know which way it's going to go. Suppose that it's barred in the U.S., well, then there will be some offshore market for it. But that's not for everybody. The idea that the offshore market is cannibalizing the U.S. market is sort of a, red herring. I don't see it that much. There are different types of players. People just don't get pushed to the offshore because they don't like a policy, or the existing sports betting businesses now are probably satisfying over 95% of their clients. So I don't think there's any reason to change. Now, if they're worried about getting swallowed up by not having a prediction market, I can understand that. If we go back to this, the one thing that these businesses have done very, very well is they've raised money in the public market. And I think one of the reasons I didn't see FanDuel and DraftKings blowing by like the Caesars, which is now William Hill Caesars, and the MGM so fast in the sports betting world, was their ability to get people that were disruptors, running companies, raising a ton of money, and they can move faster, a lot faster. They can spend a lot more money on technology. So a lot of the Las Vegas books were trapped legacy equipment, old computerized systems, old ways of booking and betting. And one of the reasons was Nevada had a monopoly for so long that there wasn't much incentive to improve the system. In fact, that was probably me and my partner, Rick Solero, were responsible for that. He had a monopoly in the computerized sports betting systems, which I owned a part of, and I have a monopoly on the odds betting system. And when you have a monopoly, you're not exactly looking to do a lot of extra work because you don't have any competition. So our technology lag behind what was in Europe.
Going back to something you said earlier, do you think that the Caesars, William Hill, like the MGMs, do you think they were surprised that they were caught flat-footed, really, as it turned in the end, post-PASPA?
They had a pretty big marketing edge, they thought. But, FanDuel and DraftKings also had their business sifting up through the fantasy sports. So they had a pretty good market base too. But they were certainly caught flat-footed in the software. And then they had to go out and buy into software.
A question that I'm going to ask you, I've asked other people who have spent a lifetime gambling, because it's a little fascinating to me, because I have dipped in and out of the gambling world over the course of my lifetime. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been pretty heavily into it, specifically with daily fantasy sports, where I'm like every day I'm looking at numbers and I'm playing the game. And I've found that my day-to-day thinking has changed as a result, right? And I forget if I talked to you about this a few weeks back, but I find that I don't really spend that much time making decisions in my own life anymore. I feel like I used to have to know for sure, is this the right girl to ask out? Is this the right dinner to order? Is this the right shirt to buy, right? Is this the right house to buy? Is this the right, all of it. And everything in my mind was always 100 or 0. Now, if it's 50.1 to 49.9, my decision's made. I'm making the best decision I have with the, material in front of me. And I'm curious, for someone like yourself who has spent a lifetime, what I'm saying here, does that ring true to you? Do you find that the gambler's mindset is actually a benefit to living day-to-day life?
No, it's the way we live, but it's not a benefit. For example, you should be looking over small edges in all types of gambling and asking yourself why I should not make this bet, or what are the consequences of making this bet. But you're taking the joy out of life if you're reading about 8 draft beers before you go into pub, reading reviews. Sometimes, the best thing is just to ask the bartender. If you don't like it, you can get another one. So I think it's robbed a lot of people of life. Look, you buy a house, that's one thing. You order the wrong thing in an ice cream shop, so what? But a lot of people let that carry over into their life.
It's funny you say that, because now that I'm looking at it, I feel like between technology and this gambling mentality, because I've also noticed, so I'm really going to tie something together here, wait for it. I've noticed that we've gamblified, forget prediction markets and all in sports, we've gamblified everything. And for kids, they play Madden, it's gamblified. My daughter was into Legos for a time. You buy the mystery packs of Legos, gamblified. Between that and technology, we went to Disney World last year. Before we went, I caught my kid, my youngest, 11 years old, watching YouTube videos of the rides. I'm like, what are you doing? You're taking all the fun out of this. It's supposed to be a surprise. It's supposed to be something, a new experience. So, all right. So I'm going to have to rethink the way I live my life. But I'm not talking about necessarily going in and I guess I am finding the edges there. I spent a half an hour last night looking for a new frying pan when I should probably just buy.
Where's the discovery? Where's the serendipity, especially in travel? Today, everybody wants to read 20 reviews before they go to a place. I don't know. Restaurants come and go. Chefs come and go. There's good nights. There's bad nights. Word of mouth is still pretty powerful for me.
So so I'm going to put words in your mouth, but I'm hearing that you try to put your gambling mindset to the side when you're living your day-to-day life.
Because I don't think it's that important. When I'm gambling, I think it's very important.
Gotcha. I want to talk to you. You're obviously, as could have been guessed, very well dressed today. That's how we've met. I wrote a story about some of the best dressed men in the sports betting world, and your name obviously came right to mind. Well, I know I interviewed you about this a year ago, but I'd like to hear the story again. Tell me about your fashion sense, where it comes from, and how it continues today.
Well, my grandfather lived in Toronto, very old school. He was born in 1890. I'll tell you how old school he was. I never, ever saw him without a suit on, ever. In other words, he wouldn't come downstairs unless he had a suit on, and that included Sundays. A lot of that carried over my father, but my father wore sports jackets on Saturday and Sundays, but not ties. And we had Sunday meals at home where you had to have a jacket on. So that's where I got it from. And also, it was a good thing when I started working in Las Vegas, because gamblers had an image of running around in sweatpants and disheveled, just looked like they got out of bed. And I was working with casinos, and I started to look like them, the people I was working for, instead of the people they were used to working for. And then I married a fashion designer, so she put a lot of color into my life. because I would never wear pink before, or I wouldn't wear orange, or I did all stuff blended. Blue suit, blue shirt, blue tie. And she got me into colors and everything. And she's a fashion designer and she's a seamstress. And she makes most of my suits and most of my clothes, as well as her own, of course.
That's fantastic. That's great. Is there ever a sweatpants and t-shirt day in the Roxborough household?
Well, I don't work out in a suit. But
I had a chance finally to meet you face to face a couple of weeks back, as it turns out, at the you invited me to be your guest to the blackjack ball. I appreciate that. It was so much fun. It's such an eye-opening experience. And obviously, one of the guys there was Ed Thorpe, right? And it's incredible. I know how important Ed Thorpe is to like the blackjack community, right? But he's equally important to you, I know, and like to like just the gambling community at large. I almost feel like so many people are doing things because of Ed Thorpe and they have no idea who Ed Thorpe is.
well, I hadn't met him until last year. Well, during COVID, he didn't come out for the blackjack ball and his travel schedule got turned around. And I think I told you I was the only person in that room that had never made a living playing blackjack. It wasn't because I didn't try either. I didn't have the focus to count. But at any event, his book changed my thought on what I should be doing, both in the financial world and in the gambling world. And in the gambling world, at that time, in my early 20s, I was thinking about narratives. I'm having a hard time with these headphones. I was thinking about narratives. You watch games, you try to learn something from them. You read newspaper stories, you try to learn something from them. And I really should have been looking just at data. And that changed my whole life in sports betting, not only as a player and then eventually as an odds maker and also as a bookmaker. So that was, I don't know if that light bulb would have gone off later on, maybe, but certainly after reading Beat the Dealer, it clicked with me. And then later on, these financial books clicked with me on modern portfolio management.
Do you think there's anything new under the sun at this point?
Well, I don't see anything new in sports betting. I just see it as a way that of something I've seen before. One of the problems is that now you have social media. You have people that are complaining about the same things we only Nevadans could complain about, or real hardcore sports bettors, right? In the illegal days, about guys calling timeouts to kick field goals and all this stuff, and whether a game finished 55 minutes or didn't get to an hour for action. I've seen it all that way. And I've generally seen a lot of stuff that people are squabbling to come up with regulations on that don't happen that often. I lived through a lot of them. I more or less helped write the baseball rules that we all use today and the boxing rules. Herb Lambeck, Art Manteris, and I probably wrote pretty close to all the boxing rules you see today. But we didn't write them because we had some great idea how to write them. Incidents would come up and they'd absolutely be controversial. And you'd have to figure out, you'd have to pay one side. We didn't pay both sides back then because this wasn't a publicity stunt we were doing. We had to be fair. And a lot of it was determined that way. And yes, some of it did go to the Gaming Control Board, which I've always thought Nevada was a little bit biased towards the player, not the house, despite what people think.
Another question that pops to mind, again, going back and looking at history compared to today, a lot of hand wringing and I hesitate to use the term mainstream media, but a lot of hand wringing in mainstream media about the, ongoing the Indians pitchers and Jonte Porter and, Trailblazers coaching, and all the incidents, max fixing and game throwing and whatnot. Do you think it's a bigger problem now that everything is legal and that sports betting has, become just part of like the day to day? Do you think it was always happening and it was just swept under the rug? I mean, what's your take on all that?
Well, it wasn't always happening because there weren't ways that you could throw the first pitch outside and make money. Now, it's happened in cricket going back into the early 90s that I know of, where there was a lot of spot fixing, where certain balls were they call deliveries, we call pitches, could be an intentional foul. It doesn't really affect the integrity of the game in one sense, especially in a game where they might be scoring 400 runs. But it does affect the integrity of the players, and it's a problem. Basically, we're seeing that now. Now, for sports books to say, or these monitoring outfits to say, hey, we've caught this, right? It shows the system works. Well, this is a little like saying, hey, this is a problem we created. We solved half of it. we're taking credit. It's insanity.
Do you think there's more of it now?
Well, just when you think that there shouldn't be any more of it, there is. But you have to realize rich people do things. I'm not talking about athletes that may be coerced to do things, not because they need the money, because somebody else needs the money. There's been threats to people's families in Eastern Europe for refereeing games in soccer. So maybe we haven't reached the surface of it.
All right. Let's say that the president of the United States decides that he's had enough between prediction markets and match fixing and, states and this and that. And they've come to you and they've named you sports betting czar. You're in charge of it all now. What do you change? What's working? What's not working? Fixing all industry in the next 2 minutes.
I'm pretty laissez-faire. I really think regulations should be done with a soft touch. Or this used to be my feeling, that regulation should be used with a soft touch and the market will figure out the rules. But sometimes the behavior is so egregious. I really can't say what I do, but I say a lot of this is on the players. Now, I know that before you sign up with Apple or Hotmail or something or whatever, Gmail, they send you 10 pages and you have to go to the bottom and say you read them and you accept the terms of agreement, and I agree. Of course, nobody's read them. I mean, there are attorneys that are reading them, right? Over 99% of the people never read it. But there are rules for sports betting, and you don't have to read them all. Boy, you should be reading the ones that apply to the bets you're making. They usually have them broken up into sports, right? And a lot of players don't understand the rules. Now, this doesn't have anything, you can't change this as commissioner, but most players look at all the disputes from their own point of view. And the bookmaker has to look at it from both sides. If I pay these guys, why should I not pay these guys? So, but what's fair for one player isn't fair for the people that are the other side. But that's an education process. Well, I mean, if I commissioner, I take it out of control of the states. That's what I do. It botched it up pretty good so far.
Have you dabbled in any of the prediction market?
Well, sort of on exchanges for elections. Liquidity is pretty high. I've never bet elections because I thought I could Einstein them. I bet them for some reason down the road. If I thought my taxes were going to go up, if a certain party won, I would bet on that party. And if they won, I would collect first and then use that money to pay my taxes later. It's like getting a refund first and paying later.
Well, I mean, that's using the prediction markets for their intended purpose, right? Which is, to hedge.
It is. Now, if you got to remember, the poly market kid one time, they was going to bring more transparency to everything there is in the world, including something that Polymark booked the day after, or put a market price on the day after he came out and made this great pronouncement. And that was, there was some porn star was going to see how many men she could sleep with in 24 hours. Well, that was right for prediction markets, according to this guy. So, hey, do we need it? No.
Not yet. Not a lot of economic hedging on that. And if there is, we've taken the wrong turn. Well, that to me is the crux of the argument, that it's very hard. It's going to be very hard for a court to look at sports betting contracts and say that these are actual economic hedges. So, I mean, but again, neither one of us are lawyers. We'll figure it out down the road.
By the way, I'll just add this. This was already tried at around 2002, I want to say, in a company called World Sports Exchange that operated out of Antigua and was founded by three guys from the Pacific Stock Exchange. And they brought this type of contract betting to the internet. It didn't catch on then, but they probably didn't have their market was sports bettors. It hadn't been financial market people. But so in other words, if you want to say, is there anything new under the sun? This has already been done, bringing prediction markets to sports betting 23 years ago.
Yeah. Well, Roxy, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to chat with me today. It's always an honor to talk to you. I can't wait to see you again in Vegas, but I kind of wish I could see you again in Thailand. That's my goal, is to knock on your door in Phuket.
Let me know when you're coming. I'll make sure I'm here in Las Vegas.
A real pleasure speaking with you. Thanks again, man. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye-bye.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove. the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.